The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as King Charles III sat in his private study, reviewing documents that would change the course of royal history. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he held the official papers, not from age or illness, but from the weight of the decision he was about to make. The 75-year-old monarch had been contemplating this moment for months, ever since Catherine had proven herself time and again as the most beloved member of the royal family. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had no idea what awaited her as she prepared for what she thought was a routine morning meeting with her father-in-law. She had been juggling her royal duties with remarkable grace, raising her 3 children, while supporting numerous charities and maintaining the perfect public image that the monarchy desperately needed in these challenging times. Her approval ratings soared above every other royal, including the king himself, and the public's love for her had only grown stronger with each passing year. The decision Charles was about to announce had been brewing in his mind since his coronation. He had watched Catherine handle crisis after crisis with dignity and wisdom that reminded him of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, when Prince William had faced personal struggles. Catherine had been the steady force keeping the family together. When public scandals threatened to damage the monarchy's reputation, she had been the calming presence that restored faith in the institution. But this decision would not sit well with everyone in the family, particularly Queen Camilla, who had fought her own battles to gain acceptance and respect within the royal household. Camilla had worked tirelessly to shed her controversial past and establish herself as a worthy queen consort. She had finally found her place within the royal structure, building her own charitable foundation and earning grudging respect from the British public, who had once viewed her with suspicion and resentment. The king's private secretary knocked gently on the study door, announcing that the Princess of Wales had arrived for their scheduled meeting. Charles straightened his tie and took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and beyond. He had consulted with his most trusted advisors, reviewed constitutional precedents, and even sought guidance from former palace officials who had served during his mother's reign. As Catherine entered the room, her warm smile and natural elegance filled the space with positive energy that Charles had come to rely upon. She wore a simple navy dress with her signature pearl earrings, looking every inch the future queen that the British people hoped she would become. Her genuine concern for the monarchy's welfare had impressed Charles repeatedly, and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life had proven invaluable during royal tours and public engagements. The conversation began with typical pleasantries about the children's school activities and upcoming royal events, but Charles soon steered the discussion toward more serious matters. He spoke about the challenges facing the modern monarchy, the need for fresh perspectives, and the importance of preparing the institution for future generations. Catherine listened intently, unaware that she was about to become the center of a royal storm that would test every relationship within the family. Charles explained his vision for a more streamlined monarchy that could better serve the British people in the 21st century. He spoke passionately about the need for younger voices in leadership positions and the importance of recognizing merit and dedication over traditional hierarchies. His words carried the weight of a man who had waited decades to become king and now wanted to use his limited time on the throne to modernize the institution he loved. The morning light grew brighter as their conversation continued, but neither of them could have predicted how dark the palace corridors would become once Charles revealed his unprecedented decision. The king's announcement would challenge centuries of royal tradition and create divisions within the family that would take years to heal. Catherine's life was about to change forever, though she had no idea of the magnitude of what was coming. As Charles prepared to deliver the news that would reshape the royal hierarchy, palace staff continued their daily routines, unaware that they were about to witness one of the most controversial decisions in modern royal history. The decision would elevate Catherine to heights that even she had never imagined, while simultaneously creating enemies within the very family she had worked so hard to serve with loyalty and dedication. King Charles cleared his throat and leaned forward in his leather chair, his eyes meeting Catherine's with unusual intensity. The words that came next would echo through the halls of every royal residence and dominate newspaper headlines around the world. He announced that he was bestowing upon her the historic title of Princess Royal, a designation that had remained vacant since Princess Anne held it, and one that carried unprecedented responsibilities and privileges within the royal hierarchy. Catherine's face went pale as the magnitude of this honor sank in. The title of Princess Royal was not merely ceremonial. It represented the highest honor that could be given to a female member of the royal family, traditionally reserved for the monarch's eldest daughter. By breaking with centuries of tradition to give this title to his daughter-in-law, Charles was making a bold statement about Catherine's importance to the future of the monarchy and her irreplaceable role in modernizing the institution. The Princess Royal title came with significant responsibilities that would elevate Catherine above all other female royals except the Queen Consort herself. She would gain precedence over Princess Anne, who had held the title with pride and distinction for decades, and would effectively become the king's right hand in numerous official capacities. The announcement meant that Catherine would represent the crown at major state functions, lead important diplomatic missions, and serve as the monarchy's primary ambassador to the Commonwealth. Nations. Charles explained that this decision reflected Catherine's exceptional service to the crown and her unique ability to connect with people across all demographics. Her charitable work had raised millions of pounds for causes ranging from mental health awareness to early childhood development. Her natural diplomacy had strengthened Britain's relationships with allied nations during state visits, and her genuine warmth had restored public faith in the royal family during some of its most challenging periods. But even as Charles outlined the reasoning behind his decision, he knew the announcement would create immediate controversy within the family. Princess Anne had served as Princess Royal since 1987, dedicating her life to royal service with unwavering commitment and receiving universal respect for her work ethic and no-nonsense approach to royal duties. The idea of transferring her title to Catherine, regardless of merit, would be seen by some as a betrayal of Anne's decades of faithful service. Catherine struggled to process the information, understanding instinctively that this honor would fundamentally change her position within the family dynamics. She had always maintained respectful relationships with all family members, carefully avoiding any appearance of favoritism or political maneuvering. Now, through no action of her own, she was being thrust into a position that would inevitably create resentment and jealousy among relatives who had served the crown for much longer. The king continued, explaining that the title change would be announced at a special ceremony the following week, with full pomp and circumstance befitting such a historic moment. Media from around the world would be invited to witness the unprecedented transfer of one of the monarchy's most prestigious titles. Charles had already instructed his communications team to prepare comprehensive briefings, explaining the constitutional precedents and the reasoning behind this extraordinary decision. As the meeting concluded, Catherine left the king's study with her mind racing and her heart heavy with the knowledge that she was about to become the center of a royal firestorm. She understood that while this honor represented the ultimate recognition of her service, it would also make her a target for criticism from both within the family and from the public, who might view the decision as inappropriate. Favoritism. The palace corridors seemed longer and more intimidating as Catherine made her way back to her private apartments. Staff members she passed noticed her unusually serious expression but had no idea that she carried news that would soon turn their orderly world upside down. The weight of the Princess Royal title felt heavier than any tiara she had ever worn, knowing that it came with expectations and responsibilities that would test every skill she had developed since joining the royal family. Meanwhile, across the palace, Queen Camilla was conducting her daily briefing with her private secretary, completely unaware that her position as the second most important woman in the royal hierarchy was about to be challenged. The announcement would not only elevate Catherine but would also subtly diminish Camilla's influence and standing within the family structure, setting the stage for a conflict that would test the very foundations of royal unity and tradition. The news of Catherine's elevation reached Queen Camilla through a carefully worded memorandum delivered to her private secretary just hours before the official announcement was scheduled to be released to the press. The Queen Consort was reviewing her schedule for the upcoming royal tour when her aide knocked urgently on her sitting room door, holding the document that would shatter her carefully constructed sense of security within the royal hierarchy. Camilla's initial reaction was disbelief, followed quickly by a surge of anger that she struggled to contain behind her practiced royal composure. She had spent years fighting for acceptance within the royal family, enduring public criticism and media scrutiny that would have broken lesser individuals. The idea that Catherine, who had enjoyed universal approval from the moment she joined the family, was now being elevated to a position that effectively diminished her own standing felt like a personal betrayal by her husband, the Queen Consort immediately requested a private audience with the king, sending word through official channels that she needed to discuss urgent matters of state. Her staff could sense the tension radiating from her as she paced her private apartments, rehearsing the arguments she would present to Charles about the inappropriateness of this unprecedented decision. She understood better than anyone how the delicate balance of royal hierarchy worked, and this move threatened to upset decades of carefully maintained protocols. Charles received his wife's request for a meeting with a heavy heart, knowing that he would face fierce opposition from multiple family members once word of his decision spread throughout the palace. He had anticipated Camilla's reaction but hoped that her love for him and her commitment to the monarchy would eventually help her understand the wisdom behind his choice. The king prepared himself for one of the most difficult conversations of his reign. When Camilla entered the king's study, her usual diplomatic demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled fury. She questioned how Charles could make such a monumental decision without consulting her, especially when it directly affected her position within the family. Her voice remained steady, but her words carried the weight of years of frustration with what she perceived as Catherine's effortless rise to prominence while she had fought for every ounce of respect and recognition she had gained. The Queen Consort reminded Charles of her own sacrifices and dedication to the crown, pointing out that she had endured decades of public hostility and media persecution for the sake of their relationship and the monarchy. She had worked tirelessly to build charitable organizations, support worthy causes, and represent the crown with dignity. Despite the constant comparisons to the beloved late Princess Diana that had haunted her every public appearance, Charles attempted to explain that his decision was not meant to diminish Camilla's contributions or status, but rather to recognize Catherine's unique position as the future queen and her exceptional service to the monarchy. He emphasized that the prince's royal title would enhance the family's effectiveness and help prepare Catherine for the responsibilities she would eventually inherit when William became king, but Camilla was not satisfied with these explanations, arguing that the timing of the announcement seemed deliberately designed to overshadow her own upcoming charitable initiatives and royal engagements. She pointed out that the media would inevitably frame the story as a competition between the two women, creating division and controversy that could damage the monarchy's reputation and unity at a time when stability was crucial. The argument continued for over an hour, with both parties becoming increasingly frustrated with their inability to find common ground. Charles found himself caught between his desire to modernize the monarchy and his commitment to his wife, while Camilla struggled with feelings of betrayal and concern about her diminished influence within the family structure. She had worked so hard to understand and navigate as their heated discussion continued. Other family members began to learn about the impending announcement through various palace channels. Princess Anne, who would be directly affected by the title transfer, received notification through her private secretary and immediately requested her own meeting with the king. The Princess Royal had built her entire identity around her role and service, and the prospect of losing her title felt like losing a fundamental part of herself. The palace staff could sense the growing tension throughout the building as urgent meetings were scheduled and hushed conversations took place in corridors and private offices. The normally smooth operation of royal protocol was being disrupted by the emotional undercurrents flowing through every level of the household, from senior advisors to junior staff members who whispered about the unprecedented drama unfolding behind closed doors. Princess Anne arrived at Buckingham Palace with her characteristic brisk efficiency, her face showing none of the emotional turmoil she was experiencing inside. As the hardest-working member of the royal family, carrying out more engagements annually than any other senior royal, she had built her entire public identity around the Princess Royal title and the responsibilities it entailed. The prospect of losing this designation, after nearly 4 decades felt like having her life's work, suddenly declared irrelevant. The meeting between Anne and her brother Charles was perhaps the most painful conversation of his reign. Anne had always been his closest sibling, the one family member who understood duty and service in the same unwavering way their mother had. She had never sought the spotlight or craved public attention, instead dedicating herself completely to her royal obligations with a work ethic that put younger family members to shame. Her charities had flourished under her guidance, and her reputation for straight-talking honesty had earned respect even from Republicans who opposed the monarchy. Charles explained his reasoning with careful diplomatic language, emphasizing that Anne's contributions would never be forgotten, and that she would retain all her other titles and responsibilities. He spoke about the need to prepare Catherine for future responsibilities, and the symbolic importance of having the princess royal title held by the next generation's queen. But Anne listened with growing incredulity, unable to understand how decades of faithful service could be swept aside for what appeared to be a public relations gesture. The Princess Royal pointed out the constitutional irregularities of transferring her title to someone who was not the monarch's daughter, questioning whether such a move was even legally possible under existing royal protocols. She had consulted with legal experts who specialized in royal prerogatives, and discovered that while the king technically had the authority to make such changes, the precedent was virtually non-existent and could face challenges from constitutional scholars and parliament members. Anne's anger was quiet but intense, manifesting in clipped sentences and icy politeness that Charles recognized from their childhood confrontations. She reminded him that she had given up personal ambitions and private opportunities to serve the crown, never complaining about the sacrifices required or seeking special recognition for her efforts. The Princess Royal title was not just a name to her, it represented a lifetime of dedication and service that could not simply be transferred to someone else like a piece of jewelry. Meanwhile, Catherine found herself caught in an impossible situation, knowing that accepting the honor would create permanent rifts within the family, while refusing it might be seen as disrespectful to the king's judgment. She had called an emergency meeting with Prince William, who was equally shocked by his father's decision and concerned about the political ramifications for their future reign. William understood that while the title would elevate his wife's status, it came at the cost of family harmony that might never be fully restored. The Prince of Wales found himself torn between supporting his father's wishes and protecting his wife from the controversy that was already beginning to swirl around the announcement. Palace sources had begun leaking information to trusted journalists, and the story was spreading through royal correspondent networks faster than palace communications staff could manage. William knew that once the news became public, Catherine would face intense scrutiny and criticism from those who viewed the decision as inappropriate favoritism. Queen Camilla, still seething from her confrontational meeting with Charles, began reaching out to her own network of supporters within the palace hierarchy and the broader aristocratic community. She contacted several prominent figures who had helped her establish her position within royal society, seeking allies who might pressure the king to reconsider his unprecedented decision. Her conversations were carefully worded but left no doubt about her displeasure with the situation. The queen consort's anger was compounded by her realization that the announcement would overshadow her own carefully planned charitable initiatives and upcoming royal engagements. She had worked for months to organize a major campaign highlighting domestic violence awareness, an issue close to her heart, but now worried that the media coverage would focus entirely on Catherine's elevation and the resulting family drama. As evening approached, the palace was in chaos with emergency meetings, urgent phone calls, and hastily rearranged schedules dominating every department. The king's communications team struggled to craft press releases that would present the decision positively while minimizing the obvious family conflicts it had created. Senior advisors who had served multiple monarchs admitted privately that they had never witnessed such internal turmoil over a single royal decision. The situation was further complicated by the involvement of the late Queen Elizabeth's former private secretaries, who were consulted about the constitutional implications of the title transfer. These respected figures expressed serious concerns about breaking with established traditions and warned that the decision could set dangerous precedents for future royal appointments and honors. Their opposition added weight to the growing chorus of voices questioning the wisdom of Charles's announcement. The royal household erupted into barely controlled chaos as news of the king's decision spread beyond the immediate family to cousins, extended relatives, and longtime palace staff who had served multiple generations of royals. The Duke of Gloucester, Princess Alexandra, and other working royals expressed their shock privately, questioning whether Charles understood the constitutional implications of his unprecedented move. Many felt that the decision undermined the entire system of royal hierarchy that had provided stability and order for centuries. Catherine spent sleepless nights agonizing over her impossible position, knowing that every choice she made would have far-reaching consequences for the monarchy's future. She had built her reputation on being diplomatically neutral and avoiding family controversies, but now found herself at the center of the biggest royal crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII. Her advisors warned her that refusing the title might be interpreted as disrespecting the king's authority, while accepting it would make her permanent enemies within the family. The Princess of Wales arranged a private meeting with Princess Anne, hoping to find some way to resolve the situation that would preserve family relationships and royal dignity. The encounter was painfully awkward, with Anne maintaining icy politeness, while making it clear that she viewed Catherine's elevation as both inappropriate and unnecessary. Anne's decades of service spoke for themselves, and she saw no reason why her title should be sacrificed to boost someone else's profile. During their conversation, Anne revealed the depth of her hurt and anger, explaining that the Princess Royal designation was not merely a title, but a reflection of her life's work and dedication to the crown. She had held the position longer than Catherine had been alive, building charitable organizations and international relationships that depended on the respect and authority that came with her royal status. The prospect of losing this identity felt like being erased from royal history. Catherine attempted to suggest alternatives, including the possibility of sharing the title, or creating new designations that would honor both women's contributions to the monarchy. But Anne rejected these ideas as constitutional impossibilities, pointing out that royal titles were not designed to be divided or shared like business partnerships. The Princess Royal title had specific legal and ceremonial meanings that could not be altered to accommodate personal feelings or family politics. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's opposition to the decision had grown into active resistance as she enlisted the support of influential friends and advisors who questioned the wisdom of Charles's announcement. Several prominent members of the aristocracy privately expressed concern that the king was making emotional decisions rather than carefully considered constitutional choices. They worried that breaking with established traditions would weaken the monarchy's authority and create confusion about royal protocols. The Queen Consort's campaign against the title transfer included subtle but unmistakable pressure on Charles, through mutual friends and royal household staff who shared her concerns about the precedent being set. She argued that the decision made the monarchy appear unstable and arbitrary, subject to the personal whims of individual monarchs rather than guided by established constitutional principles and traditions that had served the institution well for generations. Palace staff found themselves caught in increasingly uncomfortable situations as family members sought allies and information about others' positions on the controversy. Longtime employees who prided themselves on maintaining strict neutrality in family matters were forced to navigate competing loyalties and conflicting instructions from different royal principals. The normally smooth operation of royal protocol was being disrupted by the emotional and political undercurrents flowing through every level of the household. The king's private secretaries worked frantically to contain the damage, scheduling separate meetings with constitutional experts, former prime ministers, and religious leaders who might provide guidance on the appropriate way forward. They discovered that while the monarch technically had the authority to transfer the prince's royal title, the lack of precedent meant that any decision would be subject to intense scrutiny and potential legal challenges from constitutional scholars and parliamentary committees. Charles found himself increasingly isolated as opposition to his decision mounted from unexpected quarters. Even some of his closest advisors who normally supported his modernization efforts expressed serious reservations about this particular choice. They warned that the controversy was overshadowing important government business and creating unnecessary divisions within the royal family at a time when unity and stability were essential for the monarchy's survival. The situation was further complicated by growing media interest in the story, as royal correspondents began investigating the constitutional implications of the title transfer and interviewing experts about the precedents and protocols involved. Several prominent historians publicly questioned whether such a dramatic break with tradition was appropriate, while others defended the king's right to modernize royal titles and responsibilities to better serve contemporary British society and values. The media storm that erupted around the royal title controversy exceeded even the palace's worst-case scenario predictions, dominating newspaper headlines and television broadcasts across Britain and throughout the Commonwealth nations. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades described the situation as unprecedented, with some comparing it to the constitutional crisis that accompanied Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. The intensity of public interest caught palace communications staff completely unprepared for the avalanche of interview requests. Editorial commentary and social media speculation, public opinion polls revealed a deeply divided nation, with younger citizens generally supporting the king's decision to recognize Catherine's contributions, while older generations expressed concern about abandoning traditional royal protocols. The debate extended far beyond the immediate question of titles, touching on broader issues about the monarchy's relevance in modern Britain and the balance between tradition and progressive change. Constitutional scholars appeared on television programs to debate the legal implications, while royal biographers analyzed the personal dynamics driving the family conflict. International media coverage was equally intense, with European royal houses quietly expressing concern about the precedent being set for hereditary monarchies throughout the continent. Several foreign royal families had their own complex title hierarchies that could be destabilized if the British monarchy began arbitrarily reassigning traditional designations based on personal preferences rather than established protocols. Diplomatic circles buzzed with speculation about the implications for Britain's soft power and royal diplomacy. Catherine's public approval ratings, ironically, began to decline for the first time in her royal career as critics accused her of manipulating the king and seeking to elevate herself above more deserving family members. The unfair attacks on her character and motivations devastated Catherine, who had never sought additional titles or recognition beyond the natural progression of her role as future queen. She found herself defending against accusations of ambition and scheming that were completely contrary to her actual personality and behavior. The Princess of Wales considered the unprecedented step of publicly declining the title issuing a statement that would emphasize her respect for Princess Anne and her commitment to serving without additional honors or recognition. Her advisors warned that such a move might be interpreted as undermining the king's authority and judgment, potentially creating an even bigger constitutional crisis than the original announcement. The delicate balance of royal protocol made it nearly impossible for Catherine to extract herself from the situation without causing additional damage. Princess Anne's supporters rallied to her defense, organizing petitions and letter-writing campaigns to pressure the king to reverse his decision. Several military organizations where Anne served as patron expressed their loyalty to her leadership and questioned the appropriateness of transferring her ceremonial roles to someone with less experience in their fields. The unexpected groundswell of support for Anne demonstrated the depth of respect she had earned through decades of dedicated service. Queen Camilla's resistance to the title transfer had evolved into a sophisticated campaign involving influential figures from across British society. She hosted carefully orchestrated private dinners where guests discussed their concerns about the monarchy's stability and the importance of maintaining established traditions during uncertain times. While never directly criticizing Catherine, Camilla's supporters made their opposition clear through subtle but unmistakable signals about their preferred outcome. The king found himself trapped between his desire to modernize the monarchy and the reality of fierce opposition from within his own family and broader royal circles. His attempt to strengthen Catherine's position had instead exposed the deep tensions and competing interests that existed beneath the surface of royal unity. Charles began to question whether his decision had been wise, wondering if his good intentions had created problems that might take years to resolve behind closed doors. Frantic negotiations began between different factions within the royal family as they sought some compromise that might preserve relationships while addressing the legitimate concerns raised by all parties. Senior courtiers who had served multiple monarchs found themselves mediating between family members in ways that had no precedent in modern royal history. The situation required diplomatic skills, typically reserved for international conflicts rather than internal family matters. The crisis deepened when several Commonwealth nations expressed concerns about the constitutional implications of the title change for their own relationships with the British Crown. Royal representatives from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand requested clarification about how the changes would affect their ceremonial protocols and official relationships with various members of the royal family. The international dimension added new complexity to what had begun as a domestic family dispute, raising stakes that extended far beyond personal relationships and individual feelings. After weeks of unprecedented family turmoil and mounting public pressure, King Charles made the difficult decision to convene an emergency meeting of all senior royals to address the crisis that threatened to tear apart the monarchy he had worked his entire life to serve. The gathering at Windsor Castle brought together family members who had barely spoken since the title controversy began, creating an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty that palace staff had never witnessed. In decades of royal service, the king opened the meeting with a heartfelt acknowledgement of the pain and division his decision had created within the family he loved deeply. He admitted that his desire to recognize Catherine's exceptional service had been overshadowed by the unintended consequences of breaking with established traditions and protocols. Charles spoke emotionally about his regret over the hurt feelings and damaged relationships that had resulted from what he still believed was a well-intentioned gesture of recognition and preparation for the monarchy's future. In a moment that stunned everyone present, Catherine stood up and addressed the family directly, requesting that the king withdraw his offer of the Princess Royal title. She spoke passionately about her love and respect for Princess Anne, acknowledging the decades of dedicated service that had earned and the admiration of the British people and royal family members alike. Catherine emphasized that she had never sought additional titles or recognition beyond her natural role as Prince William's wife and the future Queen of England. Princess Anne's response was characteristically dignified but emotional as she expressed gratitude for Catherine's gesture while acknowledging the genuine affection and respect that existed between them despite the recent tensions. She spoke about the importance of family unity and the need to put the monarchy's stability above personal feelings or individual ambitions. Anne's gracious acceptance of Catherine's gesture began the healing process that would be necessary to restore family relationships and public confidence. Queen Camilla, visibly relieved by the turn of events, offered her own words of reconciliation and support for the decision to maintain existing title arrangements. She acknowledged that the controversy had revealed underlying tensions and competing interests within the royal family that needed to be addressed through better communication and mutual understanding rather than dramatic gestures or unilateral decisions. Camilla's olive branch helped ease the awkwardness that had dominated family interactions for weeks. King Charles formally announced that he was withdrawing his decision to transfer the Princess Royal title, acknowledging that the wisdom of maintaining established traditions outweighed his desire to modernize royal designations. He issued a carefully crafted statement emphasizing his continued admiration for both Catherine and Anne while reaffirming his commitment to constitutional monarchy and established protocols that had served Britain well for generations. The resolution of the crisis marked a turning point in royal family dynamics, as members recognized the importance of consultation and consensus building in major decisions affecting the monarchy's structure and traditions. New protocols were established for discussing significant changes to titles, roles, and responsibilities, ensuring that future decisions would be made collaboratively rather than unilaterally by individual family members, regardless of their position within the hierarchy. Catherine emerged from the controversy with enhanced respect from both family members and the public, who admired her willingness to sacrifice personal recognition for family harmony and institutional stability. Her graceful handling of an impossible situation demonstrated the diplomatic skills and selfless character that would serve her well as future queen. The incident actually strengthened her position within the family by proving her commitment to collective interests over personal advancement. Princess Anne's status was reinforced by the episode, as public support for her retention of the Princess Royal title demonstrated the deep respect she had earned through decades of faithful service. The controversy reminded everyone of her irreplaceable contributions to the monarchy and her unique position as the hardest-working member of the royal family. Her dignity throughout the crisis enhanced her already sterling reputation. The royal family's ability to resolve the crisis internally, without external intervention or lasting damage to the monarchy's reputation, demonstrated the resilience and adaptability that had enabled the institution to survive and thrive for over 1,000 years. The incident became a valuable learning experience about the importance of balancing tradition with progress, showing that modernization efforts must be carefully considered and broadly supported to be successful. In the end, the title controversy that had threatened to tear apart the royal family instead strengthened their bonds and improved their decision-making processes. The experience taught valuable lessons about communication, consultation, and the delicate balance between personal relationships and institutional responsibilities that would guide the monarchy through future challenges and changes in the years ahead.